So right now, as we speak, not indicted themselves. I think Lauren Southern had not Lauren Southern. What's that motherfucker's name? Lauren Chen has been directly indicted because it was some proof found that she was knowing of working with and for the Russian government to push and support certain propaganda to disrupt the election. But I don't want to ruin the video. So this is going to be featuring the Humanist Report, and today we're going to talk about, how we talked about the Mark Robinson shit a few minutes ago. Now we're going to talk about Tim Pool and others, Tenet Media being erased from YouTube, and the company and its owners being indicted for being a shell company used to push anti-Ukraine and far-right propaganda to divide American voters. And before I begin this video, I ironically have to back up a second and give my actual position on the Russo-Ukrainian war, which I thought I would never have to do. But before I give, my general what I am or what I'm not, I feel like we need to talk about the concept of war and anti-war activism and a co-option of populist language by fascists. So, war itself is a tool and is an unfortunate byproduct of the human experiment, a manifestation of the need to climb over one another instead of working with each other. Many different ideologies and practices lead to war, but sometimes war can be unavoidable. And it's a question that we ask ourselves as humans: what do we do with people who won't come to the table to bargain for peaceful outcomes to the complex situations that humanity deal with? Ideologies such as fascism, imperialism, hypermilitarization, which is both a part of fascism, ironically enough, eugenicism, and the need for resources, the need for energy and land, and even just general control over large amounts of land leads humans to be willing to do the worst harm to one another. And I wish we lived in a world where every single person on earth could come to the bargaining table to sue for peace. But people like Mussolini, Hitler, Putin, Kim Jong Un, I forgot the person who's the Chinese president, if you can really call him that, because he's a fucking dictator too. These are people who are often at a time that are not willing to come to the table to bargain for peace. And these people, even, and I'm talking about the Chinese government too, and the North Korean government, just because they have red paint on themselves don't mean that they're communist or socialistic or anarchist in any way, shape, or form. These people are far-right zealots, dictators who throw their weight around to control and intimidate, the people that are in their sphere of the planet. And I'm not saying the United States is some saint goat of freedom, because at the end of the day, there is no such thing as a good country when all countries are capitalists and are looking for resources and ways to exploit, countries that are smaller than them. So I don't think that is a such thing as good and bad countries. I think countries so happen to be doing the right and the wrong thing given their time in history based on what they're doing. So one thing I want to talk about first, and this one's the hard one I'm gonna do first, is the left wing argument, which really ain't that difficult against arming Ukraine. Russia is not the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was not a good country. The Soviet Union did not exist for the proliferation and progress of its citizens. Despite all the bullshit written in all its documents, the people in the Soviet Union, the USSR, lived in abject poverty. There was nothing socialist about the Soviet Union. The workers did not have democracy and did not own or contribute to the means of production. Everything was done and organized by the state. And it can be argued that especially during the Stalin era that they had more in common with Nazi Germany and fascist Italy and Imperial Japan than they did with what actual Marxists and anarchists and others had in mind when they were philosophizing a society past capitalism. So this argument, that we need to feel sorry for Russia because they had something taken from them and that they were the Soviet Union or whatever, is asinine. And even given this fact that if the Soviet Union was somehow good, that does not suggest the involuntary land grab of millions of people who just want to drop their kids off at daycare and freaking I don't know, go fish. Because that's what most normal human beings like to do. Is they work and they enjoy their hobbies, they hang out with their family and their pets, and they go home. Ukraine was not a country of fervent neo-Nazis. And we taint nationalism, has been tainted, especially when pertaining to the way that it manifests itself through fascism. But it's also argued that Russia is pretty nationalistic with the way that they're going about erasing what it means to be Ukrainian and what they tried to do to the Georgian people and more. My point being is just that this argument that I see from a lot of communists, mostly Marxist-Leninists, which is a fake ideology anyway, is just not substantial. And then you have right-wing arguments. And for them, we need to talk about the co-option of populism. Everyone that says they are a populist is not a good person, especially if they don't identify themselves as a left-wing populist. Like, I was a politician or a political commentator, which you can say I am somewhat. I would identify myself as a left-wing political commentator. So populism in the 21st century, especially post-Reagan, has been co-opted by the right to mean ignorance, inactivity, lack of government intervention in social economic problems, lack of government intervention to fight against fascist autocracies that the citizens and the commentators so happen to agree with. But that's what populism means to people like Tim Pool. They're not honestly anti-war. People like Tim Pool back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and even before that, the conservative position for most events in history has been the wrong position, the evil position, if you were to take it that far to say that. The position of oppression, the position of war, the position of ignorance. And these people change their narrative based on what's happening at the time. Because you would notice, and I feel like people like Nick Fuentes and Michael Tracy are good examples of this, where they would say we shouldn't have got involved in World War II. They would say we should have got involved in Vietnam and defend what we did there. But then we come back around to the 21st century where we're facing a fascist oligarchy in Russia. And all of a sudden, we shouldn't arm Ukraine to fight off fascism. It's weird how they have wormed their way into positions that throughout history, especially when it comes to anti-communism, that Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, Lawrence Southern, I'm sure, any of these people, I don't know if Shapiro goes that far with it, but I know it's mostly the fascist, neo-Nazi leaning America, and it's not necessarily the Zionist neoconservatives, which are still fascist at the end of the day. It's more of the white supremacist side that does this anti-Ukraine thing, and it's not because they are principally America first. It's because they want to see fascists win. Remember when people said America first? It started off as a movement to defend Nazi Germany, to say that we shouldn't get involved in a war in Europe or what was going on in Southeast Asia. So, people, the Jews, the Roma, the Catholics, and whoever else these people viewed as enemies would face undue persecution simply for being different than what their country's ideology viewed as human. And they're just doing it over again. Drop a few things, and here we are. So, I hope I'm clear that I'm pro-Ukraine. I'm pro sending weapons and money to Ukraine. And then some people try to gloss it in together, because there's a difference between sending weapons to Israel, who shouldn't get nothing, and sending weapons to Ukraine, a country that's obviously under threat. I say that we should take those weapons from Israel and give them to the Ukrainians, because they actually are fighting off a large enemy. Ukraine has a right to self-defense. Israel needs to reconsider how it defends itself. But that's a whole nother conversation. So I hope Ukraine comes out of this conflict on top. And let's get started with this Humanist Report video.
Government to spread pro-Russian propaganda. Shocking, I know. Don't know who to trust these days. Now, it seems like he was unknowingly being used by the Russian government because he's both dumb and greedy. Now, additionally, there's Lauren Chen, a fellow right-wing grifter who was fired from the Blaze TV because she's also involved, albeit in a different way. Semaphore reports...
Co-founder of Media, previously obscure media company, and pay iPop to right-wing influencers to produce videos to echo Russian propaganda and other right-wing talking points, according to an indictment. Which I'm not really surprised.
Quote, Chen and her...
Oh yeah, and I also need to talk about this. I need to talk about Russiagate. Bite me, right-wingers. Russiagate was real. And a lot of people went to jail or were indicted for involvement to try to subvert the 2016 election in favor of Donald Trump. Because Vladimir Putin knows that Trump is far right, he's far right, so Trump is less likely to do anything about the conflicts in land grabs that he does in Eastern Europe. He knows Trump is a lapdog, he knows Trump is a simp. He knows Trump wants the same thing he has, but Trump can't quite get it. Let's make sure he doesn't win this election, so, you know, we don't get the whole Project 2025 thing. But my point being is just that the ties between the Republican Party, the American far right, it's a real problem. Because I've never seen anybody who wasn't far right, who wasn't also pro-Russia. It makes you wonder, why is Alex Jones pro-Russia? Why is Nick Fuentes pro-Russia? Why it was when Kanye West did that interview, I believe it was on Alex Jones or Tim Pool, he was pro-Russia. Why is it every time, you know, a right-wing commentator comes out to speak on things that they're pro-Russia? A country that was, for the past almost 100 years, the opposition. And now that the government has changed itself, even though they were never really communist or socialist, has changed itself to be far right, an authoritarian dictatorship, all of a suddenly, every right winger is Russia's friends. After all this, they used to talk throughout the 20th century about how Russia's the enemy, how we have to stop Russia, how Russia is gonna cause the end of the world, how we can't trust the Russian snow commies and all this other junk. It's kind of weird that they all of a sudden switched around as the USSR fell and gained different governments. Makes you wonder.
Her husband, Liam Donovan, are the co-founders of Tenet Media, a previously obscure media company that paid eye-popping sums to right-wing influencers to produce videos that echoed Russian propaganda and other right-wing talking points, according to an indictment. Now, if you're wondering how much money we're talking...
Yeah, I believe they were getting paid like $100,000 a video. This is the part I really care about, because this is another reason, and we might be coming up on the end of this video because I'm not trying to make my video so long. So we're going to come to the part where I'm also so anti-Russia. Russia has been funneling propaganda in America that is actively harmful to innocent people.
And if you're wondering what they were supposed to spread, well, these were the talking points. The first sentence is pretty telling. We would like to reiterate that in the United States, there are no pro-Russian and or pro-Putin mainstream politicians or sufficiently large numbers of influencers and voters.
I mean, I wouldn't say that anymore.
There is no point of justifying Russia and no one to justify it too. All American politicians and influencers are patriots and supporters of American supremacy. Now, pause right there for a moment.
mean, not necessarily. Not if they view America as a controlled. Because like a lot of people that are right wing don't like liberal democracy and they're anti-American. Like I feel as though, ironically enough, despite people saying that the left is anti-America since the 1960s, because the left fights for because ironically, when you're a left-wing person or a liberal, you fight for reform and better lives for the average American. But they call you anti-American. But when it comes to international conflict and the well-being of the average citizens, the so-called America First people are nowhere to be found. And I think this is where I'm gonna end this video. I can read this myself. They basically all the garbage we've been hearing over the past, especially 2 years coming up to the election in November, coming up now. All these topics were handpicked by the Russian government, not necessarily directly to Trump, but by the people that work for Tenet Media and maybe even other people that we don't even know about to be spoken of. Inflation, halting of economic growth, the unaffordable prices for groceries and essential goods. But that's a whole capitalism price gouger thing that we don't want to talk about. Risk of job loss for white Americans, like they're the only people that are Americans and they're the only people that need and have jobs and stuff like that. Not to mention the fact I hate this talking point so much when we talk about white people losing opportunity and money, because white people hold most of the socioeconomic power in America, so and political power, and that includes the so-called left leaning. So I don't understand this dichotomy where we talk all this garbage about white Americans losing anything. It's not real. Additional privileges, I added the additional for people of color. They literally call LGBT people a slur and putting down disabled people who already have a hard enough life. And I think number 3 is the one I would like to focus on the most, is because this goes far beyond, and I guess you can include 5 in here too. Russia right now is creating a political situation in America that's dangerous for women, that's dangerous for people of color, that's dangerous for queer folks, and that's dangerous for disabled people. Because they want people to have to asininely support their war of aggression against a foreign country most Americans can't even point to on a map. So, you know, and it feels personal, especially as a working class black man, that I have to get the shit, excuse me YouTube, please Daniel, for a war that you guys started. And I would like to end my video on talking about how do I feel about the influencers that was getting this money, and were they knowing or unknowing in everything that happened here. I feel as though, personally, this is my personal opinion, whether they known or not, every last one of the influencers should be indicted as well. Because we didn't do that for World War II people, you know, that partook in the Holocaust, for example. I don't think just following orders is a good enough, you know, escape route for the actual harm and libel that these people are putting out for against innocent people that aren't doing anything wrong. Let me give you an example. This one's for Tim Pool. So, if, you know, I get an order from the Crips, let's say, to go steal a car, and I get arrested for it, do I then get to say, you know, when my name comes up, well, they told me to steal the car, and then, you know, I might get a lighter sentence, but I'm still responsible for my actions, still responsible for the things that I've done. And I wish the Department of Justice felt the same way, but I guess in this world, there's never any true justice. But hey, at least their names are out there.